Welcome to Open House with Gerry Cornejo, where we feature people, places, and things that are in the news or who should be in the news. Well, the topic we're going to be discussing has been in the news for months, for years, even for decades. And it's going to be around for a long, long time. And we are talking about APEC and, more importantly, China. And we have with us an expert on China. Not only did he do scholarly work on China, he actually lived and worked in China for 15 years. He was there during the time of Mao Zedong and all the way to 1986 after martial law. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you, and I'm very proud to say that he's a schoolmate, Mr. Chito Santa Romana. Chito, welcome.
Nice to see you, Gerry.
Okay, so Chito, can you tell us a little bit first about your China experience from 70 or 71 to 86?
Actually, my life and work in China is divided into broadly two parts. 71 to 86. In a sense, I went to China upon the invitation of a Chinese, it's called the Chinese Friendship Association. And it was in August 1971. And the reason I stayed that long is because while I was there, the Plaza Miranda incident happened. And unfortunately, I was included among those charged with sedition. Marcos used this incident to basically try to go after student activists, student leaders, as well as the political opposition. It was the prelude to martial law. So we had a delegation of like 15 Filipino student leaders. 5 of us were charged, and the rest, the 10, were able to come home. But for those of us who stayed, we had lawyers working in the Philippines, Senator Jokno, Voltaire Garcia then, but they said they were confident we could get you back legally because we would be arrested if we came back. But when martial law came, they themselves were arrested. So that started this long stay in China. And that's when I started to study Chinese so as to get a job. And I worked as an editor in an English academic journal, the Social Sciences in China. And I was basically a translation editor for the economic articles of Chinese economists. But I was able to come home 86. Right after Marcos fell from power. And after that, I was planning to resettle back in the Philippines, work either private sector or the government, but I got this fellowship to go to the US, and that's where I did my graduate studies in international relations at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Boston. After I finished my master's, I came back to Manila. This was the time of the coups. Manila was quite unstable, and at that point I was already married to a Filipina Chinese, and they were waiting actually in Beijing while I would resettle back. And my wife said, why don't you come back here and cool off first, and let's wait for the situation to stabilize. While there, I said, I want to use my time profitably, so through some contacts I was able to freelance first for an American network, ABC News, American Broadcasting. But while I was working for them, first on a temporary basis, the Tiananmen student demonstrations happened. And I covered it from the beginning. Basically, my boss said to me, you used to be a student activist, you used to march, why don't you bring a crew and then you cover these protest marches? So I covered it from the very beginning. And it lasted for 2 to 3 months until the great crackdown, the big crackdown on the students. And that's when ABC said, this story is now world news. This is a big story. So, we want you, we want to hire you to be part of our Beijing bureau. We're expanding the bureau. I had second thoughts. I said I wanted to go home. And I've been in China already for 15 years. They said that's the type of skill we need. You speak Chinese, you speak English, you understand Philippine-style journalism, you were a student journalist. And so they offered me this job, and so I covered China. Almost 22 years. Originally I was planning just a contract of 3 years. Then the story got bigger, 5 years, and then I said, okay, let me continue covering this story until I hit retirement age. And so that's why I came back 2010. So it's 15 years under martial law, but then there were 22 years as a foreign correspondent and a foreign journalist. So it's really most of my adult career in China, 37 years.
So, Chito,
more than half of my life.
the majority of your adult life was spent in China.
Yes, there's no doubt.
Right.
My adult life.
And then this afforded you also, I mean, being with media, this afforded you the chance to come face to face with the Chinese newsmakers in all walks of life, di ba?
And I essentially witnessed the whole transformation of China. When I arrived there, it was I lived through the last 5 years of Mao. I didn't get to see him personally, but only when he was in his glass sarcophagus, when we had to pay respects on his death. But I did get to meet, during a state banquet, Premier Zhou Enlai, the top members of the Politburo, the Gang of Four, Madame Mao,
Yes.
and the other members. And then, at that time, before Mao died, Deng Xiaoping had come back to power, and he would walk around in this May Day celebration. So we got to see him. We got to see him at close range. We got to shake hands with him. So yes, and then as a journalist, of course, you do press conferences with President Jiang Zemin, President Hu Jintao. I left 2010 before Xi Jinping became president, but I knew of his career as he was rising as a provincial governor in the eastern China and as the head of Shanghai before they moved him to become the vice president and onward to president.
Okay, Chito, very briefly, we're going to go into APEC because that is ongoing. And then we must go into the dispute happening now in the West Philippine Sea. Now, how important is APEC? How important is China to APEC?
Well, APEC is Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It was founded 1989. The idea was to get all the Pacific Rim countries, and since to encourage trade and investment. China, in the very beginning, of course, was already a major Asian country, but now it's the biggest trading country in the world and the second biggest economy. So, you have 21 economies there, which includes the US as the biggest economy and China as the biggest exporter. So APEC is critical for China in terms of broadening its markets. And that's why it's proposing this, what it calls this regional economic integration, the free trade area of the Asia and Pacific. And without China, APEC would be missing a major component of the economy. So in a sense, both depend on each other. APEC is critical for China, and China is critical for APEC.
Now, what can we expect the Philippines? What benefits will the Philippines have in, of course, hosting this? I mean, we'd like to showcase our country, but aside from that, I mean, because the man on the street is they're asking, hey, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? So, what's in it for me? What's in it for the man on the street? Yes.
Well, because what APEC does is that, on the one hand, it lowers the tariffs, so that imported goods becomes cheaper. You know, the fruits from China, other goods. I mean, Chinese goods in general are already known for being cheap, but they will be exempt, tax exempt, so you are able to import more of them. The same with American apples, you know, Japanese goods, the different countries around the Pacific Rim. The moment we import from them, it will amount to lower prices and a variety of goods. And it also gives us a bigger market to export our products. And it depends on us to do a good job in it. So, beef from Australia, you know, the question is, where's the beef? The beef from Australia and New Zealand will become cheaper. The fruits, the apples from Washington, the US, oranges from China will become cheaper. So those are the lowering of the barriers. And then it encourages exports. It gives us more for our markets, and it also encourages more investment.
Okay, now Chito, but what happens now to our farmers? I mean, ito na nga, nahirap na nga. I mean, like right now, there was a big issue. Were you here when garlic became an emotional, political issue?
Yeah.
So, paano ngayon yan? I mean, good.
Now, this is the challenge.
Okay.
Because APEC follows what some would consider as the doctrine of free trade, meaning you don't protect your local sectors. So the challenge now is for the government to balance this. What do you agree in terms of lowering tariffs and what do you protect? And this is the problem with garlic. If everything is just lowered, then garlic coming from abroad will be cheaper and our local farmers would suffer. So this, I think, though, is where the government should step in. Because you have to balance not only liberalizing the markets or the tariffs, but also whether you have to protect. And it's a matter of the constituency also. You have to organize. And this is what the Japanese farmers do. There is another trade organization spearheaded by the U.S., the Trade Pacific Partnership. And again, it tries to lower. And it has actually higher standards before anybody can be a member. The Japanese agricultural sector was a major problem because the Japanese did not want to open up the agricultural sector because the Japanese farmers were very organized and resisted. So this is a challenge also to the local farmers to organize and resist, because only then can you protect yourself. Otherwise, the basic economic philosophy driving APEC, TPP, all of this is really just lowering the barrier. It's free market. And the balance between free markets and state protection, national protection, is a critical balance that is up to each government to determine where your national interest lies.
Pero Chito, talagang dehadong-dehado ng mga farmers natin, di ba? The imbalance is there, and it's only
the weakest sector in the economy.
And it's only going to get worse. And sabi ng mga iba, itong APEC na to will only profit the bigger economies. Is this true?
Well, there is a problem, okay? Because it depends on one's organization, one's resources. So the ones that definitely are riding, benefiting directly from it, are the big companies,
okay.
The ones with resources.
Hold that thought, Chito. We're just going to go on a short break and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, you're listening to Mr. Chito Santa Romana. He's the president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies. He spent a total of 37 years living and working in China. And we will be talking about something more interesting or something more emotional to the Filipino people, and this would be about the Spratlys and about the so-called land grabbing ba ang tawag doon. We'll be back right after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Open House with Gerry Cornejo, where we feature people, places, and things that are in the news or who should be in the news. And our discussion for this program is going to be mainly about China. Earlier we were talking about China's role in APEC, the ongoing Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. And in a while we're going to be going into the row in the West Philippine Sea, or is it the South China Sea, that has reached the international community. And this is something that our guest will expound on. And we will be talking also about the posible kaya magkagera doon. Pero before that, we were talking about APEC and how, as of now, it is profiting the big economies, no? So, pero paano ito? I mean, is there any chance na makikinabang din tayo rito, Chito?
Gerry, any arrangement, economic arrangement, merong cost and benefits.
Okay.
The key here is really the government, and in consultation with the people and the different sectors, a determination of the trade-offs. Do you gain more or not? what do you benefit from, and what costs are involved. One thing you mentioned, agriculture. So if we want to develop your agricultural sector, and this is really the weakest sector we have right now, we have to figure out how to encourage agricultural production. And it's not only APEC that's a problem there. It really involves more of the national priorities and the budget allocation. Because even without APEC, the question is even self-sufficiency. We don't even have to talk of exports. Just supplying the local, our local consumption is already an issue. Whether rice or garlic or other crops. So this is an issue that really that has to be resolved by the national leadership. It's a debatable issue. There are two narratives. As you know, I have good friends at the University of the Philippines who argue that APEC basically means a sellout.
Okay.
And there are those who argue that this is the way out to prosperity. And these are two contrasting points of view. One is considered the neoliberal, or the what we studied in standard economics, free trade, and the other one tends to go more towards protectionist. And this clash is basically the story of economic struggle.
Okay, where are you at? Where are you at, Chito? Nasaan ka? Nasa anong faction ka? Nasa gitna ka? I'm sure you're not in the middle.
Of course, as a student in LaSalle, I knew free trade. I studied free trade economics. But as I got involved in the student movement and got involved with the nationalist movement, I saw the merits of you have to develop your manufacturing, you need protection. Now, the problem is the situation now, you have globalization. So the key is, can you do what Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the four tigers, plus the biggest one of all, China did? They took advantage of the world market where they could, and yet develop your own manufacturing. Protect what you have to protect, the strategic sectors. And this is actually the problem. We have gone perhaps on the other end of liberalization, and the question is now, where does our national interest lie? And I think it lies somewhere in the middle. It's you go for free market, for market forces where it can promote competition and promote better quality, but then you have to determine what are the weak sectors that you need to protect.
Okay. That is very clear that nothing is clear. Wait and see.
This
Wait and
is
see
a continuing debate, and it's never easy to answer this in a... I've gone more into geopolitics, and I feel more comfortable there. When it comes to this, the basic framework I start with is that Japan developed not because of free markets. It's the same with South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan. They actually protected first.
Right.
And then at a certain... More so with China. Up to now, they protect their banking, finance, telecom, but they try to develop competition among the state-owned companies, but foreign investors are not allowed, or they're only allowed a minority share. So what I'm saying is that there is a spectrum of policies you could adopt, not wholesale liberalization and not wholesale protection or nationalization.
Okay. We're back where we started from. but that's okay. That's okay. I mean, this is, I understand, and people understand that this is a very tricky, this is a very delicate situation where you have
the point
to
I'm
walk the
making is
tightrope.
not binary. It's not either or. It is a spectrum.
Yes.
And the question is, your one's determination of a roadmap that accords with the interests of the broad majority. And so when you mention that it affects agriculture, which is the weakest, but which affects the biggest
The biggest
proportion
yes,
then there's something
Philippines,
wrong.
yes.
Obviously, there's something wrong there.
Okay, ngayon, Chito, we get into this. Unahin na natin yung pinaka-nakakagulat sa lahat. With this row happening now, the Spratlys between the Philippines and China, anong possibility na talagang magkaroon ng gera dito na talagang shooting war?
It is possible, but there's a way to avoid it. There is a chance it could happen, but you could reduce the likelihood, and I want to explain it in these terms. You know, itong issue ng Spratlys and the Scarborough, no, can be divided into at least 3 dimensions. No? One is yung tinatawag nating territorial. Sino ba talaga ang may-ari ng Spratlys, ng Pag-asa, ng Ayungin Shoal, ng Scarborough or Panatag Shoal? The Chinese claim all the features in the South China Sea. The Taiwanese, the same. The Vietnamese claim all of the Spratlys but not Scarborough. Tayo, ilan sa Spratlys ang kine-claim natin, ilang isla, pero kine-claim natin ang Scarborough. So, territorial, land, yung nakausli pagka high tide, yung nakalubog pagka low tide, then you go to the second question. So, territorial. Second is maritime, too big.
Okay.
Okay? The waters. And this is where the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea applies.
Yung UNCLOS.
UNCLOS.
Okay.
UNCLOS applies to waters, not to the land or the islands. So, yung kaso natin sa Hague covers only the waters. And what we call yung lumulubog, yung nakalubog pagka high tide, what we call the submerged reefs or the low tide elevations. Merong stipulation ng UNCLOS dyan. We are entitled, kaya tinatawag natin West Philippine Sea. West Philippine Sea is part of the South China Sea. There's an overlap. Ang definition natin ng West Philippine Sea, yung 200 miles from our land, our coastal areas, no, our baseline. Because under UNCLOS, you are entitled to 200 miles exclusive economic zone.
Okay.
Yung 12 miles na territorial waters, complete sovereignty. EU yan. Yung 200 miles is not complete sovereignty. We call it sovereign waters, pero the only thing we have is really economic rights to develop it, to fish there, to develop kung may oil or natural gas, sa atin yun. And this is where may away. The Chinese, they claim Spratlys as an archipelago. Tapos sabi nila, although they haven't declared the baselines, they're counting their 200 miles not from Hainan or Guangdong, hindi dun sa mainland, kung hindi mula dito sa Spratlys. So they claim we have overlapping. And because may overlap, therefore, kailangan mag-negotiate. Ang position natin, and that's why we took it to court, na we don't have an overlap. Kasi sa tingin natin, and you go to a distinction here, it becomes a little technical. All of these formations sa South China Sea are really rocks, not islands. Pagka rock, nakalabas yan pagka high tide, pero human habitation is not possible. Walang source of water supply, there is no human population there. And it is true, walang Chinatown sa any of this, or wala ding fishing Filipino barrio, no? Ginawa natin yon sa Pag-asa. Pero still, we have to bring supplies. Kung rocks lahat yan at walang island, kasi kung island, entitled to 200 miles, then we narrow the difference between China and us, or Vietnam, or Taiwan. Yung mga, bawat isla dyan, 12 miles lang, 12 miles lang. We don't have an overlap. Kung walang overlap, what we call as the recto bank, or reed bank, which is very close to Palawan, is totally within our EEC. Because now the Chinese claim
Pati yung
overlap. Kaya nga, it's very important to finish the arbitration to provide legal clarity. The Chinese may not recognize it, but if you have an international ruling saying this is the case, then we have stronger leverage if ever you talk to them again or you resort to bilateral. Ngayon, ang defense ng Taiwan and China is that there is at least several that are islands, hindi lang rocks. And the one that they give as an example is the one na hawak ng Taiwan. It's called Ito Aba in its original name, or Taiping Island, as the Taiwanese and the Chinese call it. Like Pag-asa, merong mga Taiwanese soldiers doon. Hindi yan hawak ng mainland, hawak ng Taiwan. But under one China policy, therefore, it is part of the mainland. And the Taiwanese claim that it actually can supply water. They claim 60 tons annually, 80 tons of water. And then they showed the film. I attended the conference in Taiwan. And they showed this film na merong gulay, may puno, may prutas, aside from the fact that may airstrip. No?
This is Taiwan, huh?
This is Taiwan. But this is as part of China now. If this is considered an island, then up to where ang overlap? At kung may overlap, you have to determine yung tinatawag na median. Hahatiin nyo. So, that's why it's complicated. Kasi we have to determine first what are rocks, what are islands. And second, kung may island, meron ba tayong overlap? And then, most of all, if it has to do with island and rock, it's not covered by UNCLOS. To resolve the issue of sovereignty, it's not covered by arbitration. It has to be through International Court of Justice.
Okay.
Now, under the International Court of Justice, iba sa UNCLOS yan. Sa UNCLOS, pwede kang, ikaw lang mag-file, kung the other side, like China, does not recognize it, it recognizes you can push through. Under ICJ, kung sovereignty, kailangan both sides agree. So it becomes a little technical. What I'm saying is that even if we win an arbitration, the territorial issue remains to be solved. It won't solve everything. And even do sa maritime entitlements, yung tinatawag natin, kung ma-determine, pag kami overlap, hindi rin covered by arbitration. It has to be solved by the two parties.
So bilateral.
Bilateral or mediation or conciliation, meaning arbitration will solve some, but not all.
Okay. Hold that thought again. Pagbalik natin,
Sorry, it's become very complicated.
No, it's okay. I mean, it is. If it was not complicated, it would have been solved a long time ago.
Yes.
Pero ang pangamba ng ating mga kababayan, a lot of our people are thinking, well, we're hoping and praying that it doesn't come to a shooting war, it doesn't come to violence, it doesn't come to a confrontation. I mean, may confrontation na ngayon, pero so far it's political, diplomatic, so okay lang yan. We have with us Mr. Chito Romana, an expert on China, and this is the most important thing that we will be discussing when we return. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Open House with Gerry, Cornejo, where we feature people, places, and things that are in the news or who should be in the news. And of course, we're discussing now APEC and China. But more importantly, we're discussing now about the issues as Spratlys and itong nangyayari ngayon sa West Philippine Sea, also known as the South China Sea. Nagkakaroon ng hidwaan ang Pilipinas at ang bansang China. Now, Chito, of course, we're talking about territory. Pinaglalabanan ang territory. Bakit ngayon? I mean, ano ba ito? Prinsipyo lang? Or are we talking about billions and trillions? Other people say, well, right now, nakikita natin, fishing, food.
Yeah,
fishing. Yun ang pinapag-away nila. Ngayon,
that's definitely an issue.
Sinasabi nila ngayon, hindi lang fishing. Yan ang andyan ngayon. Pero it's actually, there's more oil there than Saudi Arabia. And then they're also saying there's this element called deuterium, which could make us the richest country in the world. So, totoo yung I'm sure totoo itong isda, because yun ang naglalabanan ngayon, Filipino and Chinese fishermen. Pero how about this oil and this deuterium, Chito? What do you know about this?
Yung deuterium, I don't have a lot of knowledge about that. I thought that was more on the Philippine Sea, dun sa kabila, sa
Okay.
eastern side, no? Yung Philippine Deep.
Okay.
Pero dito, ang primary economic interest ng Philippines is yung tinatawag nating Recto Bank or Reed Bank, international name, which is very close to Palawan. At inuumpisa na nating, we were starting to survey, to do a seismic survey already in 2011 nung dumating yung dalawang Chinese patrol ship at tinaboy. Yung actually it's a foreign ship na leased by the Philippines. Why? Because Recto Bank, based on initial surveys, could supply more than Malampaya. Malampaya now
Yes.
is the source for 40-50% of the electricity ng Luzon, no? But Malampaya is going to go down in about 10 years, less. That's why the Philippines, it takes about that time to develop a field. So that's why it's quite urgent for us to figure out, ito bang Recto Bank sa atin ba ito? Or is this something that we commonly claim? In other words, that China is entitled to under UNCLOS. And that is what we hope the arbitration tribunal. So we have a real interest in terms of energy security, particularly for the electric supply sa Luzon when Malampaya goes down.
Okay. Now, earlier you were talking about geopolitics
Okay.
and this confrontation. Ngayon kasi ang naka-front, China ngayon, tsaka Philippines. Pero sino bang mga nasa likod na to at sino pang sasali dito?
This is what I mean. No? Nabanggit natin yung one dimension is territorial. Second is maritime. Land, waters. Third is the issue of control, geopolitical. Here you have this issue not of the Philippines and China alone, but it's really the established power, a dominant power, and a rising power. Because of China's economic rise, and it's now the second largest economy, it was able to develop military naval power. No? And if you, from Second World War, particularly since the end of the Cold War, the U.S. has been the dominant military power. Meaning, sa South China Sea, East China Sea, Asia Pacific, the U.S. basically is the dominant power. No? And now what the Chinese are doing is that they're challenging. And so, it's no longer yung tinatawag na unipolar, U.S. alone in control. The Chinese have developed the power to challenge. And they want to share. And some people would say they want to drive the U.S. away and be in control. Ang isang showing this is that in their white paper on the Chinese defense, they have something called the Near Seas Doctrine. Na yung Near Seas nila, anong Near Seas? South China Sea, East China Sea, yung waters along China. They consider that their maritime defense perimeter, or basically their backyard or their front gate, and they want to be responsible for defending that. Ang problema niyan, what it implies is that everything from Japan down to Taiwan, all the way to the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, what we also call the 9-dash line, is basically they're claiming as part of their defense perimeter and as part of their near seas, and therefore something that they consider as part of their strategic interest. What is happening now is that the U.S. basically, with what the U.S. has done, nagpadala sila ng destroyer to sail by the artificial island to challenge China's, what the U.S. considers as excessive claim ng China, and then nagpalipad pa ng B-52 over the South China Sea. Although they did fly over the islands, but they didn't enter the 12 miles, but they were around there. Basically, the U.S. is conveying the message to China na we are not gonna give up on the South China Sea. You cannot control the South China Sea. And by constructing itong mga isla nito, artificial islands, not only is this an issue now between the Philippines, because we also claim those islands, actually they were submerged reefs. Kasi alam mo,
Reclaim.
that na-reclaim.
Oh.
Kasi if you look at it, the Chinese may use history as their basis and all that. The fact of the matter is, nung pumunta doon yung Pinoy, si Admiral Cloma, or Cloma, he uses the Admiral as a title, but it's not a real title. Walang Chinese doon, walang Chinatown, walang tao, walang Vietnamese. At most, in one island, the one I was saying, the biggest one, the Taiping or Ito Aba, the Taiwanese came and controlled it. But China did not have a presence in the Spratlys. They came only in 1988. And they came at the expense of Vietnam. Nagkaroon sila ng sagupaan, a clash. The Vietnamese lost lives and the Chinese started to take over. Itong mga submerged reefs, pinagtiyagaan nila kasi yung the best beachfront have been taken over. Pagasa, Ito Aba, and the Vietnamese have the most. We control really, in terms of having our forces, around 8 or 9. The Chinese have roughly the same. Actually, 7 lang yung kanila. And they're claiming a Yungin, no, to be an 8th. The Vietnamese have around 20 plus. Sila pinakamadami. Pero quiet sila, kaya tayo, ano sila, they have negotiations with China, and yet they have a strategic partnership with us. But the point I'm making is this. The broader picture that brings about the question of war and peace is because the Philippines won't go to war with China. No? The question is whether the Chinese will move on and use force to take over. From their point of view, they think we are illegally occupying their islands, Pagasa. From our point of view, they are illegally occupying what we believe to be our territory. But the point is, we really did not control Fiery Cross before. None of the 7. We only control, and if you don't occupy and control, your claim really becomes weaker. Okay, the U.S. though, in a sense, the U.S. got ticked off. Bakit? Because the Chinese not only expanded, built these artificial islands, gumawa sila ng 3-kilometer long airstrip. Not only one, they're building 2 more, sa Mischief Reef, Subi Reef. So what is this? So the U.S. basically has come to the conclusion that the strategic intention of China is to declare what they call the ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, which they have done in East China Sea, so that any plane that is flying over the Chinese would ask, identify yourself, friend or foe. The U.S. thinks these are international skies. No? So they're saying to the Chinese, no way, we're not going to give up. And the fact that they built these facilities, the U.S. basically is afraid that the Chinese will deploy anti-ship missiles, anti-aircraft carrier missiles, and deny the 7th Fleet access. And therefore the Chinese will control the South China Sea. The U.S. is saying, no way, we will defend the freedom of navigation. It is because you have this clash of the dominant power and the rising power, the question of war. Because there is a Harvard political scientist who studied since the 1500s the cases of what happens when the 2 clash, a rising and established power. 16 cases. 12 has ended in war.
12 out of 16.
12. So the historical average is 75%. But it does not mean it's inevitable. There are cases where there have been peaceful transfer. And if we are in the stage of globalization, through economic interdependence, through more high-level dialogues, through more diplomacy, this is what the U.S. and China, in a sense, are trying to do now. Trying to see if you can control the risk factors to eliminate. But the possibility of miscalculation is there. There will be American ships that will try to sail by, and American planes that will try to go, that will try to fly over. And we already know in 2001 and even last year. In 2001, nagkasagupaan sila. So the Chinese plane crashed and they lost the pilot. The American plane had to do an emergency landing in the Chinese island of Hainan. At kaya the American crew was held for more than 10 days there bago pinawalan. So that the possibility exists. And then, even last year, an American surveillance plane nilapitan a Chinese J-11. This is their modern plane. And then flew very close. So the possibility of conflict exists. That is the danger.
Okay,
of
ngayon,
war.
Chito, alam mo mindset ng mga Chinese and the more recent ones. So, we already know that the United States will not hesitate. Di ba? I mean, to gera gusto nyo, okay kami. I mean, they've demonstrated it ever since World War II, no? To the present. Ngayon, ang Chinese ba, I mean, are they prone to call
There is a problem.
Oh.
Kasi the U.S., as we've seen, no? Iraq War, Afghan War,
Vietnam
War.
Oh.
Pero the U.S. learned from Vietnam. They don't want boots on the ground. The moment namamatayan sila, it becomes a problem domestically.
But they
So,
did it in the Middle East again.
they did it.
Oo.
Oh, pero now what they're doing, drones
Oh,
or
okay.
airstrikes,
All right.
that is their tendency right now, to minimize.
Mm.
They don't want to sacrifice their lives.
Right.
But they are arming their allies, including us.
Oh,
Japan.
kayo. Kayong taya. Right.
Kayo, taya.
Yeah.
But we will supply you with necessary
Right.
air cover and all. That's one problem, that the Americans, although overstretched, could still initiate. The Chinese, though, ito ang the other problem. The Chinese think of it, this is our land. This is our illegally occupied land. Sovereignty is at stake. The national pride. Chinese nationalism comes into play. In which case, they will try to challenge the American patrols. So the possibility of skirmish. If the Americans were to strike the Chinese mainland, the Chinese have the capability to strike also. So you go into a nuclear threshold. And that's what's probably keeping it under control. Kasi the Chinese now not only have a first strike capability, they have a second strike capability. Meron na sila ng land, air, and underwater capability. So they have the strategic triad, kamukha ng US.
Right.
So this will keep the two, I think, from once starting it. But however, because of this, if you look at it, the South China Sea is not so big after all. Napupuno na yan ng mga fishing vessels, Coast Guard ships, the American ship, the Chinese submarines, and all of this. So when you have like a small bathtub with all these toys, ships sailing by,
Right.
you can imagine.
And
This is where the risk factors increase.
and we are the small fish in the big pond.
We are the small fish.
Okay. So with that, thank you very much for those insights. So as far as APEC is concerned, as far as Chinese-Filipino relationships are concerned, well, it remains to be seen. Pero yun nga, maganda sinabi ni
There
Mr.
is hope,
Chito
but there are
Santa Romana, merong risk na mangyari, pero meron din solution dito para wag mangyari yon. So with that, maraming salamat, Chito. Thank you very much.
Gerry.
Thank you very
Thanks a
much.
lot. Thanks a lot.
So until next week then, we will bring to you people, places, and things that are in the news or who should be in the news. So until next week, Open House with Gerry Cornejo will be back. I love you. God bless you. Take care.